In Kristen's absence today, I'll be filling in. So we'll call the meeting to order. Do a roll call real quick. Here. James, you here?
Yes, I am.
Barb, you here?
Here.
Okay, Mike's here. Any additions or corrections to the agenda? Not seeing any. Approval of the minutes or discussion on the minutes?
Move to approve the minutes of April 14th, 2026 meeting as presented.
Support. Second by Chris. Any discussion? In favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So before we get into the public comments, just let everyone know, because we are going to use part of the meeting to review the study on the capacity study. We're going to have 3 public comments today. So we'll have one now. We'll have one at the conclusion of the presentation from Jacobs. That's probably where the meat of the questions will come from. And obviously we'll have one at the end of the meeting. So I'll open it up to public comments now, which is, again, we're not reviewing the study yet. So you may want to hold off some of the questions. So have you seen any hands up there?
Oh, that's it. Yeah, she's holding it up.
Betsy?
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you. Elizabeth Malik, North Township. I read the letter that was submitted last month to the NLTUA board from Barb Connolly about the parcel split. And I just had some comments about that. I've been following that a little bit, but it was very apparent that there were some errors made. And we have several parcels that go from Northport Point Road to Woolsey. And I would suggest that NLTUA work with the township in the village. Actually, this would be a township property, but work with them as far as any future splits has to be through some sort of form that would be notifying the township that NLTUA possibly needs to be involved, because I really think this was a bait and switch. I bet if you went back and looked at the tax roll, that originally that parent parcel would have been deeded and taxed to the property located on Northport Point Road. I have not done my homework on that particular issue, but certainly that's an easy thing to assess. And if that's the case, the two parcels, the baby parcels that came off from that, should at least have the 10-1 assessment on them. I understood in Barb's letter that yes, they would be assessed once hooked up, but my understanding from 20 years ago was that we all had to pay the 10-1, the hookup of the 5850, which those numbers have all changed, but that hookup fee was later on if it was hooked up. So I just would caution that maybe NLTUA can put in place some form that has to be signed off by the municipality. There may be splits that are allowed in the village. I'm not aware of any, but doing some due diligence to allow the oversight would be, I think, helpful. And we don't need to lose any REUs that we've already got. So look forward to the meeting. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Betsy. Anybody else with comments? Anybody here in the room? Any public comments to start off? Okay. Thank you. Payment of the bills.
Oh, you have the bills in front of you. I'd be happy to answer any questions. We did make, the payout today is over 168,000. That is because we had debt service payments to the village and the township. To the village was 114,000 collected. So, but other than that, I did report in my clerk's report that we did purchase 2 more grinder pumps during the month of April. you have any questions over the bill sheet, I'd be happy to answer them.
I just noticed that the electric bill seemed a bit high, 7,451. 21.
With the higher flows at the treatment plant in the month of April. Yeah, pumps are working.
Okay, I'll move to approve payment of bills in the amount of $168,847.47.
We have a second.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, we'll do a roll call. Chris?
Yes.
James? Yes.
Yes,
Right, yes. So we'll move to staff reports. Start with Joan.
Yeah, I provided the trial balance and a revenue expenditure report along with a written report that I submitted to the board. Just updating you again on, I did send out a letter for those cross connections, some pump inspections. Chris Holton can touch on that in his report. We've been working through the audit for the 2025-26 fiscal year. That's been all done electronically. It's gone pretty well, and I expect to have probably a report for the board. I believe they plan on presenting in August, but I will confirm that with them. I do, it was brought up at our last month. I do provide these Jacobs reports. These are the monthly reports and payments that are made. Just for information, because they're not on the bill sheet, because these are paid through ACH, the direct bill pay. So just so you know, and keep track of, what's being paid, and that's represented in the financial reports this month too. Happy to answer any questions that you have for me.
Any questions for Joan? Treasurer, or excuse me, Deputy Treasurer's report.
Yeah, the deputy treasurer did submit a report. I did include it. It was yesterday in the packet for you today. And it's just all of the receipts and deposits. I think at our next meeting in August, we'll have a conversation. If it's okay with the board, put that on our agenda. Just with the new system that we're moving to with BSNA and how those deposits are handled. We have some questions about the logistics of that, getting that completed with the treasurer, taking those deposits to the bank. So I think it'd be a good time for the board to have a discussion about that. Okay.
Any questions from yours to that report? Superintendent's report.
Yes, I didn't get it into your package, but recently we worked with Jacobs technicians to do the force main cleaning throughout the system. And we did some of the, also this is the biannual scheduled maintenance issue that we flushed spring, fall. We did the gravity system, exactly something else. We had a new connection on East Circle Drive at Paradisha Point. It's completed, a live tap conducted by Top Excavating. We're gonna have a couple new connections potentially coming on this summer here within the village. In Jones' report or summary was the cross connection inspection for force main, well, throughout the SAD, and I'll be conducting those. That's going to be something that Zach will speak to as they go out. There's a maintenance issue with one of the grinder pumps. We kind of look for any clear water coming in at maybe a timed interval that would indicate that there's a cross connection with some pumps going into the sanitary system, which is not allowed. So that's something I'm going to be kind of going door to door on too. And as we go along, these fellows get a report or they'll let me know. Also, we have a manhole repair. Maybe some of you have noticed a cone been sitting down on North Shore Drive. Manhole was damaged during our plowing, early plowing season. So that's something that's kind of on the line too. So that's all I got.
Any questions from Chris? Joey, have we communicated anything to the users of the system about the sub pumps?
I sent out a mail. Yeah.
Any responses or?
I had a couple calls.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Questions that come
Yeah.
across. So
Yeah. And the communication, I'd be happy to share it before it, just letting them know about our rules, and the inspections and what we're looking for.
Because it's not legal, right? Sub pump connected to this.
Correct, it's a violation of our ordinances. Yes.
Mr. Jacobs?
I'm Mark Hoggard with Jacobs. Monthly report, just a couple updates in regards to the April heavy rain event that occurred. So the plant received the highest day was just over 158,000 gallons, which obviously exceeded the April event that's in the permit. So that was reported to Eagle following reporting procedures. Along with that, or since the report is submitted, all results are in on total phosphorus, and we did exceed our daily maximum for total phosphorus. So we had a 0.6 milligram per liter, and then there's 0.5 for daily average for our daily maximum. It's just over it, but that was also reported in the monthly PMR to Eagle. As long as with that, the monthly average, so we have two permit limits for total phosphorus. You have a maximum date, and that which is 0.5 milligrams per liter, but we have a monthly average, which means all the sample results we have below 0.3 milligrams per liter. Our monthly average came out at 0.4 milligrams. Since fell back compliance, most of that is to the fact of the blockage, feeding the lower sand filters. So we had to run on one sand filter, the upper. Once we were able to get that resolved, the effluent cleared up, and of course the phosphorus. So that was the difference. Are there any other questions with the report or on that?
You go a little bit on that, what happened in April 15th,
April 12th,
April 12th.
yeah, probably.
Did it isolate the North Port or was it for
Oh,
the state?
no, Traverse City, give you an example. In Traverse City, the flow in the Oregon River, the highest previous recorded flow rate was like just over 500 cubic per second. In that event, the Oregon River was hit on the cubic per second flow rate. So it was the combination of frozen ground, heavy runoff, snow melt, heavy rains. That's quite bad. So in that region of Traverse City, that was a 500 event, which doesn't mean it have to be only every 500 years. It means it has a 2% chance. And,
So anything we saw in the news like a Sheboygan, Cadillac, they were all going.
that was, well, dam failures and such. Just one note on Traverse City too, not to give you a scale of this event. That the dam that they replaced at the street, had they not went forward with the replacement of that, and get it that it is, the dam would not have survived that. If the engineers made that statement, and that would have been a catch. So the scale of that was very awesome.
Any questions for Jacobs?
I just wanted to, I was just reading recently on something on this issue. And the idea of the maintenance and moving one of the pipes that they did
Yes.
underneath the parkway was fortuitous. Otherwise, we would have brought sewage to
Yes, they had the main force main downtown and along the river behind Front Street. It along with the bigger gravity next to it. And the city proactively moved that to the center of the back street, avenue, just a few years ago, and that had no mass, folks that, yeah, most of it, sidewalk, become things and expose the infections.
Very good budget report. Thank you. So we'll move to discussion on potential action items in the capacity study presentation. We have somebody from Jacobs on Zoom.
Yep, Stephen Roberts is with us today.
Steve will take us through the presentation. Again, understand there's 5 parts of the study. This is what was covered in today's 1 and 2. So maybe you can help out there. You'll wait up 3, 4, and 5.
Yeah, thank you to the board for, oh, sorry, Joni, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, Stephen, I'd be happy to pull the report up and show that. Does that sound good for the public?
Yeah, I have it here too. If I could share my screen, I am happy to do it.
Okay, I can make you a co-host right now and
Okay.
you can share your.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Good morning to the board. Thanks for hosting us this morning. I'm Steve Roberts, and I am the project manager for Jacobs on the capacity study. Let me know if you all can see my screen. Did it load?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yes.
great. I also have with me today Christy McCarthy from Jacobs, and she's based in our Columbus, Ohio office. And Christy is one of our wastewater process leads within our organization, and she led the treatment plant capacity study analysis.
Good morning.
So as you all remember, we were tasked with studying not only the wastewater treatment plant, but also the collection system. And so what I have here on my screen is the executive summary in the technical memorandum that we shared with NLTUA. And Christy and I were planning to just talk through some of the high-level findings of what we found in the study. I'll pass it over to Christy now to present a little bit about what the team found in the wastewater treatment plant analysis.
Thanks, Steve. So the major findings from our capacity evaluation, the good news, your biological treatment process, which includes the pre-anoxic zone, the moving bed biofilm reactor or MBBR, those could support more than double your current loads. And that's on a kind of a maximum month average load basis. And we looked separately at kind of the summer busy season and then the rest of the year. So a couple of surprising things that we found though, as far as your peak hydraulic capacity at the plant, that's primarily when there is inflow and infiltration into the collection system from wet weather or snow melt. The polishing filters are not sized to accommodate the peak flows that the plant is currently seeing. We looked at minute by minute data from the influent pump station. Or maybe it's just it's the last lift station before the plant. And, we looked at those flows, we looked at how long they last, how often they occur. So, these aren't typical conditions, but it is critical for the plant to be able to pass through the flows that are coming to it. So, the hydraulics of the plant are constrained by those filters. So, we are currently working on additional tasks as part of this project, which include looking at how to mitigate that. And the couple of alternatives we're looking at are allowing for automated equalization of those peak flows, so that when the flows exceed the filtration capacity, excess flow goes to basin number 2, and there's a lot of capacity there for equalization. And then the other alternative is a new filter facility using cloth disc filters that would be sized to accommodate, peak flows that the plant sees now and that you might expect the plant would see in the future. So those polishing filters are really critical to meeting your total phosphorus effluent limits. Phosphorus occurs in 2 forms in the effluent, either soluble or particulate. And the soluble is quite easy to remove. Some of it gets removed biologically and the rest through a chemical precipitation reaction, which the plant doses ferric chloride to accomplish that. So that both of those processes convert the soluble phosphorus to particulate. And then the filters are what remove that particulate. So, it's important to make sure that those filters are consistently operating as they should. So we did mention that the plant could in the future see a new effluent inorganic nitrogen limit or some kind of nitrogen or ammonia or total nitrogen limit. Since we, can't predict what future limits will be, that was not part of our evaluation, but it is something to consider. So our primary recommendation was to, somehow mitigate the peak flows. And then we're also just about to wrap up task 3 of this project, which was to evaluate the solids handling processes at the plant. So after the biological treatment process, the MBBR, there is some sludge generated that needs to be separated from the effluent. And the current systems at the plant are not doing that as effectively as they were intended. So we will also, in the future, have another technical memorandum like this one that will go through alternatives and options for upgrading the solids handling at the plant.
Thank you,
Steve,
Christy.
Yeah, you have anything to add?
No, I think that was well said. As Christy mentioned, we understand that the analysis showed that the filters weren't capable of handling the flow. And so I just wanted to reiterate that we are working on developing a proposed solution to that in terms of the flow equalization using treatment basin number 2. And we're looking forward to presenting that to the board at a future date. I may pause there and just ask the board if you have any questions on the wastewater treatment component of our study. I do want to talk a little bit about the collection system analysis too, but I wanted to pause and ask the board if there are any questions on the first part.
Yeah, I have a question under 5.1 design capacity. So the plant is not currently operated as the original design intended, and previously it went through several issues that are not operating as intended. Do you mind going through those a little bit?
Yeah. I think Christy can speak on this, but I think that primarily that statement was related to the filters. the O&M manual states that the filters can be operated in series, but in reality, the way that the filters are installed hydraulically on the slope, they're not able to function that way. So our analysis showed that here's the example of the drawing. The way that these polishing filters are actually laying out in the field, they are not able to function in
Parallel.
in parallel. Thank you, Christy. In fact, they can only operate in series. And so that's part of the analysis that we found that limits the hydraulic capacity because of the way that the filters are on a slope here.
Yeah, it may,
there was
I think, sorry, we may also have been talking about the secondary treatment solids separation. So that involves the cavitation air flotation process and then the secondary settling zone. And in those cases, so currently the cavitation air flotation is being bypassed because of a valve that has malfunctioned. But when it was operating, it never performed as well as the design called for it to perform. It never removed as high a portion of the solids as the design intended. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that was the other thing that I was noticing in the report is that it's offline right now. And then I don't know why it never performed as expected, even when it was online. So
yeah, so we will be discussing that more in the upcoming technical memorandum for task 3. But essentially, the reason is this type of process requires what are called micro bubbles of air. They need to be extremely small, less than 100 microns. And this type of cavitation air equipment it doesn't generate bubbles that are small enough to really effectively attach to the particles and float them to the surface the way that they're supposed to. So one of the alternatives that we will talk about in the technical memorandum for task 3 is basically retrofitting this process, this cavitation air flotation process, to a dissolved air flotation process. And that just generates the microbubbles in a different way. It uses what's called a saturation tank, and it mixes air and water at high pressure inside that tank, which causes the air to go into solution at above its typical saturation rate. And then when it's released back into the flow at the head of this tank, it forms those tiny microbubbles. It's a very effective and proven way to do that. So we will have recommendations for how to improve this process within the existing structure.
thank you.
Any other questions at this point? James, you're good. You're good. You can move on then, thanks.
Okay, absolutely. So the second part of the study was to evaluate the collection system, and our team prepared a hydraulic model using the PC Swim modeling software to model the collection system and the flows as they flow through the system and are pumped ultimately to the wastewater treatment plant. And as Christy mentioned, the data that we collected from the operations team showed that these high inflow events to the plant correlated with some of the wet weather events in the area. And we correlated the results from 2 and 5 year storm events and showed that there is an increased risk for flooding and capacity issues along North Mill Street, North and South Shore Drive, North Bay Street, and South Shabwasung Street. And so in talking to the local team there, we understand that there has been limited amounts of actual flooding events. So I just want to caveat by saying that these are model scenarios, and ultimately the the high flow events are real because we see them entering the influent flow meter at the plant. And so the results of the study seem to indicate that there may be some I&I events, what we call infiltration into the system, and that could be from various sources, either high groundwater or potential for illicit connections from sump pumps, as was discussed earlier. And so our recommendation primarily would be to address the flow equalization at the plant, which will help the ultimate capacity of the wastewater treatment plant. But secondarily, NLTUA could potentially do some sewer televising and or targeted investigations to see if there are ways to limit I&I in the future. Just to be clear, that the model did show that there are no concerns during dry weather conditions, either during the wintertime or the summertime. It's all driven by the wet weather events. I'll pause there and ask the board if you have any questions about the collection system analysis.
So I think what the board, one of the things anyway, the board was interested in is, can the system support new people coming onto it? And it looks like yes, as long as we don't have any of these high flow events. Do you have any idea of the quantity of new tie-ins or users we could have?
We are working on that. That's part of our additional study tasks. I don't yet have a number right now, but we will certainly report on that in a future meeting. But to answer your question, yes, there is capacity during dry weather events. So standard traditional sanitary flows, both the collection system and the wastewater treatment plant can handle those. It's the wet weather and I&I that drives the capacity.
Could you maybe just define wet weather? So obviously we get snow.
Yeah.
Factor is in more the rain.
Yeah, it's snow melt events in the springtime as well as the rainfall and other times of the year.
Thank you. You can continue if you want to.
That was all that we had planned to present this morning. So I'll leave it at that and ask the board if you have any final questions, or otherwise we'll be looking forward to our next presentation as we wrap up the solids handling evaluation and recommendations for the future improvements.
Do you have an ETA on that one?
We're diligently working through both of those documents. I think that we could be prepared to present to the board in the July meeting. I know there may or may not be a July meeting, so we could present in July, or we'll be prepared to present in the August meeting if that's the case.
One question I had, in referring back to the study, you had some collection system model development, number 9. You were describing some of the piping out there, some of the infrastructure. Can you kind of elaborate on that? I'm trying to interpret it myself, but.
May I ask you, can you repeat the question? I had a hard time hearing. So you asked about the collection system model.
Yeah, and that was under point number 9. And we showed a bunch of pictures regards to the layout of the system, and we color coded it in some instances. Is there a reason for the color coding, or is there anything we want to draw our attention to?
The color coding, so we built the model based on the record drawings that were prepared by the engineer of record. And so the color coding, I mean, this is a snip from the modeling software. So the yellow are pipe segments and the blue dots are manholes. I'm not sure if these are the colors that you're referring to, or perhaps it was the analysis presentation. And these graphics, these were intended to show what the capacity is for each individual pipe segment. So we've color coded them based on the range of their capacity. In blue here, during summer dry weather events, majority of the system is between 0 and 25% capacity utilized. Is that
health? So is anything you want to draw our attention to with regards to that specific map?
No, I mean, I would say that to the board's previous question, this directly shows that during dry weather events, so normal flow, the sewer system is has very low capacity, up to 25% full. So, i.e., there would be an additional 75% capacity throughout majority of the system during dry weather events.
Jared, our village supervisor, had a question.
Sure.
Steven, I wonder how much you might modify or how much you've taken into consideration what's happened recently. You spoke to it a little bit, with the April event that we had. We seem to be coming around to calling it a 500-year event. It was a really unique event. And it seems from the flow data that clearly indicates the primary contributing factor to capacity issues on one day was the combination of snow melt and rain. And I just wonder how that might maybe modify or change some of what you interpret from the model results. Because maybe another way to frame the question, when I look at the model results and we see capacity color coded or there's variations in the system and we talk about infill and infiltration, really it seems the primary culprit is that event. It was groundwater. Mm-hmm. And it's the only way for groundwater to really effectively get into the system, cause that kind of capacity issue on one day is through sump pumps, not through I&I. So I just wonder if that changes somewhat, maybe what is presented here, because it seems like the model is more directed at the collection system, including the gravity portions of it, and that's really not. It doesn't seem like that's the primary culprit.
And Steve, could you actually model with and without that day? It's not to ignore the day, but the fact that it seems to have spiked the potential results of the study.
Yeah, I think I heard Mark say earlier that the flow in April was somewhere on the order of 150,000 gallons. Is that correct, Mark?
Yeah.
So
yes,
we did, after speaking with Joni and Jared previously in a draft of this memo, we did go back and insert NOAA data, from the oceanography administration, and I think that it's here. Let me just show the data that we included in the tech memo. There is actually more than a dozen or so events between summer of 2023 and summer of 2025, where that peak flow was on the same order or even higher magnitude than 150,000 gallons per day. You can see here in the table that many of these exceeded 150,000. So while I could say, yes, we could model it without these higher peak events, and that's what we are presenting in that dry weather flow data. Ultimately, the driver of the analysis is still the high flow events. Whether it's illicit connections or I can't really speak to whether either of those are a larger contributing factor, but I think ultimately the wastewater treatment plant and the polishing filters are being affected by these high weather events, which seem to occur more than 8 to 10 times per calendar year.
A quick follow-up.
Yes.
Would you expect potentially 100,000 gallons per day in additional flow just from infill and infiltration, not including some pump connections? Does that seem possible?
I should say that these numbers are really based on peak hourly flow. So I know we talked a little bit about this previously. The numbers on the left-hand side of this table here are what are quantified in the peak hour. And the number on the right would be extrapolated if that peak hour were to occur over a 24-hour period. So I would say that I don't know for certain that 150,000 gallons would come in a 24-hour period, but I could see that 6,000 gallons might come in 1 hour through infiltration. So I do think there is a potential for that. It would just have to be something that would have to be evaluated through sewer televising or other targeted flow metering activities.
Thank you.
Of course.
It's okay if I just add a comment that, if we found 2 or 3 years ago that volume pipe, along North Shore, and there was, they go from that, to that pipe just groundwater. So that's something that maybe there's something out there we don't know about, then that potential exists too. As far as the price of all of those, the only exception. That's a possibility as well. So that's what Steve's saying, we could televise it. So.
Yeah, I mean, I get that there is the potential for I&I, like the unknown conditions and so forth. But and I also understand, I think, the point about peak flow per hour versus over the course of a day. But we know what that was for one day recently. And it just seems really hard for me to believe or understand how much groundwater could potentially get to the plant just from compromised gravity collection. It just seems really obvious to me that the sump pump connections are really what's driving it.
That certainly might be true.
Yeah.
Hey, Stephen, so I'm hearing you correctly, you're extrapolating 1 hour of measure to 24 hours?
That's right. Yeah, that's just the industry standard of the way we look at gallons per day. We call it a peak hourly flow. You can see here in the table, a lot of these events, this peak hourly flow only occurred for 1 hour in a given day. I'll zoom in a little bit more. Many of these had 2 hours, 1 hour, 1 hour, 2 hours. There was one large event in March 30, 2025, where that flow occurred over 8 hours in total. But ultimately, when we talk about treatment plant evaluations, we use peak hourly flow on a 24-hour basis just as a measuring stick. Ultimately, the plant needs to handle that flow in a single hour increment because it has to pass through the polishing filters at a certain rate. And that's why, just circling back to our previous idea of flow equalization, that's where flow equalization can come into play. On those peak hour events, some of that flow can automatically be stored more or less in the equalization basin, which then can help the ultimate treatment plant capacity by letting it circulate through the filters at a slower rate after the event.
Thank you. James, any questions?
No, other than just the observation that, 500-year event doesn't mean it happens once every 500 years. It could happen next year again.
Right.
And as a matter of fact, I talked with a climatologist friend of mine about this very subject, and he said the odds were something like 50% that we would have another 500-year event within 10 years. So my concern is that with potential climate change, that the assumptions being made here are all in error, and we're going to have to deal with this on a more frequent basis.
Additional questions?
No, I'll just make a comment that, many of the areas that on the model are prone to flooding or having more flow than needed are areas that were or are wetlands. So the groundwater is high.
I would just say going forward with our inspection with the cross connection with sump pumps, that will be, something that I will continue to report, and it'll be interesting to see what we do find out there. What impact that's going to have. So you have to excuse me, man.
Jacobs, anything came out of that? The review of the first and the second study that you guys want to add some light to?
No, I think it all aligns with what we see in our day-to-day operations. So, yeah. I guess I could elaborate a little bit on the cap. So we said that that's bypass. So that basically because that isn't producing the micro bubbles needed to get the sludge layer that we need to remove the solids, that chamber just pretty much becomes a white spot in the pipe and a sediment tank. So bypassing that sends it to the same place. It all ends up going to the settling basin downstream. But it just keeps us from having to clean out that tank. So until that is functioning, having that bypass is not just going to change anything in the short term.
Johnny, did you have anything? Very good.
Yeah, maybe, I don't know if there was some public comment.
So we'll move to public comments then, specific to the study. That's we kind of keep it limited to the study. And then we'll have a final opportunity to do public comments at the end of the meeting. So I'll open up the public comments specific to the first and second levels of the study.
Randy Cook, North Shore Drive. A couple of quick questions with regard to one, the infiltration. I guess I need to be educated a little bit because I thought at one point in time I heard someone say that's a fairly isolated system and that independent of rain, stone, and those kinds of things, there would be a fact. But that may not be true. So I'm hoping that maybe in the process of further discussions, we can better understand infiltration. And then how common is something like that event and with other similar systems? I mean, is it too hard to take that stretch that there actually is infiltration that occurs with it? The second thing that I hope to hear more about is I went back and looked at all the information in the reports from the group with regard to sump pump connections. This goes way back like to 2020. And so I hear that we're going out and we're going to inspect and those kinds of things, but yet I saw notes going back several years saying we thought this was the same concern. So if it is the same concern, what's going to change? Or what is the difference from what we talked about in 2021 or 22 to now? And there seems to be a lot of speculation that that's it, but yet I don't see any data or any suggestion over those years that said we've determined that that's exactly what it is. So I'm hoping we'll do less in terms of guesstimating, estimating, and more in terms of actual information. So anyway, I don't know if you guys are allowed to answer that, but that's a question some that I have.
A little different set of rules right now because we're adding that third public comment.
Yeah.
Specific to the study. So should we open it up? Did somebody can respond to that question, or we hold it to the next time?
I mean, I would like Chris to respond to that because he's my inspector.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, so
Yeah.
we can
Can we talk about infiltration?
go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's exactly like Randy is echoing some of what I was just speaking to, and that's what I wanted to try and get at with some of these questions, is trying to understand exactly how to break down, how to analyze in more detail what the various sources of I and I are.
I'm not an expert, but that wouldn't surprise me that a system would have weak points at some point in time, and you could have that. So, I'd rather than, what I was excited about having this report done is that now we can maybe look at some factual information. But would it be, is it okay if they would try to answer the infiltration question? Are you guys okay?
Steve,
Yeah.
Steve,
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to ignore it.
That's okay. I'm glad you brought this up because I wanted to touch on this on Jared's earlier question. The flow data that we analyzed showed that the daily influent, we call it an R value, which is a value that assigns the percentage of I&I, was actually 0.6%, which in the industry represents what I would say a well-performing collection system. So I wouldn't describe the system as being in disrepair or anything along those lines. It's actually pretty low in terms of I&I percentage values. We did include in the model a value of 1% to be a little bit more conservative, but the actual data that we saw based on the influent flow was closer to 0.6%, which is pretty low. So
Yeah, Steve,
go ahead, Christy.
sorry, if I can add to that, the amount of I&I as seen in the difference between your average daily flow, your annual average daily flow, or your dry weather flow compared to the peak hour flow. For systems your size, it's very typical for that peaking factor to be 3 or 4 times, where your peak hour flow is 3 to 4 times higher than your average flow. It's actually very typical. It varies depending on the type of collection system, the age of collection system, but it's not really anything out of the ordinary.
Questions?
Oh, yeah, I have lots of them. I am curious about, they mentioned some of the suggestions and recommendations to address some of these issues that are going on right now. And I'm curious when we might see financial estimates of that has. And I made some stuff with that type of information being available. And then to Barb's question, I support that, is I'd still like to get my head around what we truly do have left in capacity. And I think that would relate to a final question, and I will shut up with that. When there's got to be a best practice, there's got to be oversight that says we have to anticipate for these very high moments that they occur, right? We can't predict them. Nobody has a crystal ball. So how do we, as the board, make decisions on what we do when we know that this one thing is sitting there? It could be, pretty significant, and just day to day. I mean, we can't sit around and hope all day, every day we have dry weather. So I'd like to know, is there a solid recommendation or a guidance or a standard that addresses those high peak areas that we have to measure against?
And when we get 3, 4, and 5 reports, I think we'll get closer to probably answering your question.
Okay, including the Dixie capacity.
That's our goal.
Okay.
Anybody else in the room? Any questions to respect to Mr. Doug?
Excuse me. Just a couple of questions. What is the capacity of this second holding where you would put the equalization? Where would this equalization? I assume that's hit 2 or something.
Yeah,
And so what's that capacity?
yeah, it's Spacey too, and, Steve, I try to remember off the top of my head what that value is, but I wanna say it's like over 300,000 gallons, is that right?
I'm not sure. I don't know if you have that off the top of your head, Christy.
Well, let me look.
Hey.
I have the O&M manual pulled up on my screen. I can look at.
Well, if Mark's answer is anywhere near it, that's a good answer because you got a lot of flow, but there, you also seem to have a lot of capacity to grab it.
Right.
Yeah,
And if you're looking at hour, it's showing the levels for 1 hour, where we hit those high flow rates or that it's low enough.
and then the second question, I'm satisfied with that, Christy. You don't need to spend a search on that. The second one was a question that came up earlier in the meeting about, see, we got my note here, something's offline. And I'm questioning, how long has it been offline? Is that something that's within 10 years ago or 3 years ago or what? I mean, the plant's 20 years old, so, or almost. So how long have we been offline with that problem?
Yeah, so the cavitation air filtration has been on.
Yeah, it looks like they lost the connection in the room there.
Will it just come back on?
I'm not sure. I guess I'm the host now, so I'm assuming that if
Maybe
Joni's
we've
able
got
to,
to go out and come back in.
yeah, we could try. We may not be able to though, if because Joni would be the host. If they've lost connection there, that would be, yeah. I'm not familiar with Zoom, so
Does the cost, since I've got you
sure.
trapped, I'm a resident in the township, and on the sewer, and been upset with the fact that they indemnified the engineers, the village did in the
Mhm.
beginning, because there's been a lot of design flaws. So I will bring this up, but do we have a cost estimate for the filters, or is that coming in number 3?
We're still working on that. That'll come in our future presentation. We're working on it, but it still needs to go through quality control and be reviewed.
Is there any idea, Steve, even in a range of what that might look like?
I'm not prepared to share just yet.
Okay.
I still need to
Okay.
review it personally.
Yeah, I didn't know if it was major or minor, like, 50,000 versus 200,000 versus 1 million, that's a big range.
Understand. I will tell you though, we're working on multiple solutions so that the board can evaluate something that might be a little bit more or less costly now and more temporary, or a larger capital expenditure. So we will have alternatives.
Okay. I do use Zoom a lot. I think we sign back out and try
Okay.
and come back in.
Okay. Sounds good. We'll give that a shot.
Yeah, we
Thank you.
try. Thank
Thanks,
you for the
Elizabeth.
report.
Of course.